Hello and welcome back to Let's Replay Hotline Miami 2. I got one last bonus video for you, and here I'm going to show you a bonus level called the Abyss. And what's special about the Abyss is that in addition to being a bonus level, it takes you back to the intro of Jake's last level, where he discovers the whole 50 blessings thing and unceremoniously dies for it. So to unlock this level, what you have to do is win the last floor of that level without dying, and then on the table of the room where the general guy says he's going to get coffee, you gotta pick up the floppy disk, and then what's-his-face, Evan, can come grab it in the very end. So, do all of that, and you get this bonus level. Now, the first thing you'll notice about it is that it's pretty big. Mercifully, we're spared from the glass hell of previous levels, but that'll only take you so far. So, we're in for a lot of off-screen deaths here. Now, before I go any farther, I should probably mention that I'm actually recording this in post, and that's because I wanted to talk about something very specific. However, I wasn't able to juggle it and the playing as well as I'd like. What I wanted to discuss specifically was Hotline Miami 2 itself. So, in case it's not obvious, I really like this game, and that's why I LP'd it not just once, but twice. Though, I'm not sure if I was able to communicate what exactly I think makes the game so great and so worthy of your time when there are so many other great titles out there competing for your time and attention. So I wanted to try and cover that very explicitly here. In short, I think the central appeal of Hotline Miami 2 comes down to a combination of the gameplay and the story. Now, it's not too surprising. That's something that most good games have. You could call that the common denominator, tie that binds, whatever. But what makes Hotline Miami 2 special? Well, let's start with the gameplay. What's special about the gameplay is that it is a very fast, exciting game. This game gets my heart pumping and my adrenaline flowing like shit. I have trouble thinking of other games. Almost no single-player games. Like, when I think about it, maybe the original Killing Floor, Tripwire Interactive's Not Zombie slaughtering game, and it's really about it. And there aren't that many more PvP games that do it either. I'm not sure how well that comes across watching the play since you're a degree removed from the action itself, but when you're there, actually in the heat of the moment, it really provides those moments of sheer panicked intensity where you're going on nothing but reflex, just desperately trying to hang on like nothing else. It's a real adrenaline thrill ride, and I know that term's been bandied about quite a bit, but I can't think of a better example of the real deal. At least when you're not playing peekaboo with guys with guns like I am here. I'll definitely say that playing Evan Pacifist, you won't get a whole lot of that excitement. But I digress. That is, I think, the central appeal of Hotline Miami 2, and don't get me wrong, there are definitely some major failings, though since it's so similar to the first game in core design, it really comes down to a couple design decisions which I think were questionable, though they did provide a few incidental benefits as well, so it's not strictly a total loss. Of course, you probably already know what those downsides are. Indeed, you can see one of them right now. It's the windows and the sheer scale. No one likes off-screen deaths, and this game delivers that in spades. Those are the most common ones, and I think what turns a lot of people off the game at first, so that they never come back, and that's really unfortunate. Because you see, I maintain that most people don't actually like the game the first time they play it through. Hell, they probably don't like it too much the second or third time they play it through. That was certainly the case for me. I absolutely hated the game when I did my first playthrough. And I wasn't too hot on it for the subsequent ones either. I really only stuck with it because Hotline Miami was one of the few games that I really felt excited to play and had that sort of compulsion, I suppose you'd describe it, where you just get itch. You really, really want to play this one game and get that one sort of experience. And Hotline Miami did that for me. Very few games did that. So I stuck with the second game, simply based on the hope that eventually I would see the appeal, the brilliance of it. And eventually I did. It came down to a single central epiphany I had, which in retrospect is remarkably obvious. It makes it all the more amazing that I and so many others fail to notice it pretty much immediately, and that's Hotline Miami and Hotline Miami 2 are games that you really need to play fast. I've mentioned it a few times in passing before, but it is very easy to fall into the trap of trying to play the game like a tactical shooter, and I think there's a sort of common experience among everyone that leads to it. You get to the first level, you try and get into the thick of the action, it's all exciting, and then you get shot immediately trying to cross a room, or some dog clips through a door and gets you. Some little thing which you don't think should have got you, and it honestly feels kind of unfair, and it gets demoralizing when it happens over and over again, because this is definitely a game where you grind at it and repeat the same thing over and over again until you get it perfect. Fortunately, the non-linearity of the levels keeps it from getting too repetitive, but that is still a core fundament of the experience. And so then all of these people get demoralized and they start going really, really slow. Chances are it won't have too much effect on how frequently they die, but I mean, what else can you do when going fast and really getting into the thick of it doesn't work? That's obviously going to be your first reaction. And the game isn't fun when you take it slow. At least, it's not fun to me, and I can't think of anyone I've encountered who finds a really slow-paced Hotline Miami fun. So maybe take it with a grain of salt, but I sure can't find anything to recommend it. So if we assume that, then it means that you have a whole lot of people which are playing the game exactly the wrong way. And because the game is so hard, remember, it was a game that was made very pointedly to appeal solely to the fans. Well, primarily to them anyways. And so the fans are, of course, good at the original game because they like playing it a lot. And there's no bigger fans of a game than the developers themselves. So naturally, they got to be the best at the game. So they designed a game that was hard to them. And that means that everyone who's not really, really good at the game kind of just slips through the cracks. And that's a lot of people, which I think accounts for a whole lot of the negative feedback that the game got. But eventually, if you put enough time into it, you'll develop the skills that you need to go fast. And when you get those skills, then I think the game truly comes into its own. And that's where it delivers an experience that I've not seen in any other game. Indeed, very few games, I could only think of one, even come close to it. And that is the central appeal to it. The one thing that I think, even in the video LP, couldn't quite come across. That is perhaps the single greatest reason for you to go out right now. I'm talking to you watching the video. Go out and buy the game. Buy it, play it, and enjoy it. And with the level editor, you're not going to be stuck with Denethor starting levels. Indeed, there are already quite a few custom levels and new campaigns, which are quite a bit easier to help you find your sea legs. So the future is looking very bright for the game. But as I said, that's only half of the experience. There's also the story, which I think is a lot harder to... It's a lot harder to explain the fundamental appeal of the story because I feel like I'm describing not a specific quality so much as the absence of in a bunch of other games, because Hotline Miami 2's story, particularly in its narrative, presents something that you really feel should be in every game, every piece of media, every narrative, or nearly so, in that it delivers something that feels really plausible and told like a real chain of events. There's a very contrived nature to so many stories, especially in video games, where it feels, well, just that, very contrived. And there's a whole artificial quality to it because you don't feel like the things that are happening in an authentic way driven by the story. Rather, they're driven by the need to, say, advance the plot, give the player something to do, or just make something happen. That is, the events feel like they're imposed from above, from without, and that really does a lot to harm the plausibility of the whole thing. The suspension of disbelief, the immersion in the second world. And that's the one thing that I feel Hotline Miami 2 doesn't have that almost every other game does. It feels like every event that happens is something that's happening naturally, logically, in a very plausible way. I said this is something really hard to describe because it's the sort of thing that seems so obvious that it's practically taken for granted. It's one of those things like a story has characters, or it's told in a largely linear fashion. Maybe not in the more meta sense. Well, I'm getting bogged down in details. It does something that should be assumed, and it does it very well, which, even despite being something assumed, is something that most other games and many other pieces of media really don't do. And that's a big part of what's so great about it, but it's not the only thing. I'm running out of time, so I gotta be quick about it. I think that there's a central and very beautiful message to Hotline Miami 2. The game is very nihilistic, but I think what makes it so great is that it doesn't just wallow in the nihilism. Rather, in that it finds something very beautiful and very hopeful, which I think can be summed up by the very last line, which it says, "Leaving the world is not as scary as it sounds." Or no, leaving this world is not as scary as it sounds. I think there's something wonderful to that, and I think if you take the time, you'll find as much to appreciate in Hotline Miami 2 as I did, both in the gameplay and the story. Thank you very much for watching. It's been a great trip, and I hope you'll stick around for my next LP, whatever that may be.